World War I, the Great War, provided the men and women of the Australian Imperial Forces with a variety of confronting experiences on the Western Front. This front stretched for approximately 475 miles in an S shape from the North Sea to Switzerland. It fortified the significance of trench warfare and mechanized weaponry and highlighted the fact that despite their training, most young Australians were unprepared for the horrifying experience it provided. Armies in the field had to develop a new system of battlefield evacuation and treatment. Regardless, life in these trenches was unforgiving with constant danger, little protection from the elements, and the threat of disease. Trench warfare was the ultimate defensive maneuver. The lack of mobility that cavalry have previously provided meant that any forward action led to significant loss of life. Source F reveals the nature of trench warfare by labeling and clarifying the different aspects of a trench and the ground and air space around it. The source indicates vital areas of the trench, such as the concrete blockhouse, storing the machine guns that struck down approaching Australians from afar, laying waste to any Australian offensive attack. From the source, we gain insight into the horrifying area of land known as No Man's Land, riddled with shell-hole bogs caused by constant bombing of both sides. These bogs proved to be major obstacles slowing down any Australian offensives. Reaching an enemy trench was nearly impossible, with meters of barbed wire protecting the front of a trench, and long-range artillery bombardment killing and wounding thousands. A glimmer of hope in the miserable offensives that killed so many Australians was their eye in the sky. This was a friendly aircraft that would fly over an enemy trench and warn troops of the enemy's position in the trench. This proved valuable assets to the Australian troops, allowing them to plan where to strike, offering a minute chance at survival and capture of the enemy trench. The majority of wounds sustained by the AAF were a result of flying metal such as shell fragments and bullet shrapnel. Mustard and chlorine gas and the high-velocity bullets from rifles and machine guns added to the carnage. To deal with thousands of casualties, there were stretcher bearers of the Australian Army Medical Corps. Their job was to bring back the wounded out of the battlefield to an aid post, where they were examined and sent behind the lines to casualty clearing stations. Source D is a detailed description that provides an insight into the experience of an Australian stretcher bearer, G.D. Mitchell. He explains how he was detailed to help two other stretcher bearers take a patient downhill. He recounts trying to fit through the sap, a deep, narrow trench. However, they couldn't fit, forcing them to climb on top of the sap and hence be targeted by the enemy. The officer recalls himself and another stretcher bearer losing their footing in the deep shell hole, causing all four bearers and the patient to fall. By the time they got the patient to the medics, it was too late. Officer Mitchell sat exhausted and slept beside a fellow soldier. When he woke at his neighbour and looked, he recounts seeing the familiar waxen colour of death. In 1914, Australian women were not allowed to hold any military position except as nurses, and they played a major role on the Western Front. Source X by Sister Alice Ross King, pages 63 and 64 of Jane Bassett's Guns and Brooches, tells of her experience through an artillery barrage at a casualty clearing station and the scenes in 1917. The source reveals the harsh experiences faced by nurses on the Western Front and the courage they displayed. Sister Ross King describes the deafening roar of the planes and artillery and her feelings of being the only living thing about. She recalls calling an orderly to help, but to her horror he had been blown to bits. She tells of body parts everywhere and limbs landing on patients' beds. Sister Alice Ross King was one of the 4 nurses awarded the Military Medal for her devotion and bravery under fire. The First World War was unlike any other conflict in human history. Our national identity started to evolve with our soldiers and nurses building foundations for a strong reputation of courage and independence. However, overwhelmingly for all Australians, there was the experience of shock, grief and loss.